It's a brand new year and a new opportunity to re-engage with our daily habit of drawing. This is Sketch Endeavor. Roll that intro. I hope this video finds you well. My name's Andrew, and if you're new to this channel, let me just take a quick minute and explain to you what Sketch Endeavor is all about. This is our opportunity as artists, in particular as painters, to re-engage with a habit of drawing. Drawing and painting go hand in hand, and if we have a lacking in our drawing skills and abilities, that's going to show up at the easel. So here what we're doing is we're just creating this daily habit and just pushing ourselves to draw as often as possible, preferably daily. And this is going to end up having results at the easel. So I thought I'd take this opportunity in this episode of Sketch Endeavor to share with you a seascape drawing from pretty much the start to the finish. And we're going to detail this, and I'm going to show you some graphite techniques that I've been working on over the past few weeks. Let's get started. We have an amazing, rugged coastline here in the South Island of New Zealand. This scene is going to be inspired by the west coast, just outside of an area called Haast. I love the seascape here particularly because these jagged, rocky forms just seem to jut out and really stick out amongst all of that white water and that foaming sea. Now in this drawing I want to use a bit of artistic license, so I shot plenty of photographs on the day that I was here collecting reference material, and I want to get some elements that I saw further down the coast, some of these sea stacks, and add this in amongst some breaking waves, and then have this cliff, this outcrop here, just coming in on the right hand side. Now this drawing is going to be a little bit bigger than some of the works that you saw me create over the last Sketch Endeavor episodes. I wanted to try something bigger, more a complete scene, rather than a whole bunch of little sketches. Now I'm going to begin things here with some graphite powder and a paper stump, and use this to just lightly brush over the paper. Again, I'm using a Dreadnought gray, and this is going to leave an impression of the landscape without getting too fine a detail out at this stage. It also helps me control some of the tone. Now, my apologies in advance. I accidentally deleted one of my memory cards when I was filming the initial stages of this drawing, so this is where we're going to pick it up. Fortunately, I didn't lose too much material, so you can get a basic idea of where I'm going with the drawing. And I'm using just the side of this paper stump to brush in some of that graphite powder. Now again, charcoal and graphite are very different. Here, this is a graphite drawing. The two will not mix. And what I'm going to be doing is, because I want this to be a tonal drawing, I'm going to be preserving some areas for some really bright highlights. So in the initial stages, all I'm worried about are the darkest tones. Now what this paper stump allows me to do is cover a broad area, a vast amount of paper, relatively quickly. It's almost like painting, and I think that's why I've enjoyed this process so much. Now with a drawing like this, the principles are pretty similar to as if I was painting the scene. We're going to reserve those darkest darks for the immediate foreground and have it get progressively lighter and have the contrast lessen the more the scene goes back into distance. And this will create some sort of sense of depth. Now, we're a little bit hemmed in here. We don't have the added benefit of color perspective to help aid the illusion of our drawing, so it's just down to our tonal dynamic. So as long as I control those tones carefully, I'm going to be able to create that depth. So again, reserve those darkest darks for the immediate foreground. I will also, as I detail this drawing, you're going to see that I'm going to really define whatever's in the foreground with a lot sharper detail than whatever's furthest away. Detail draws the eye, so we want to reserve the most crispy elements for the immediate foreground. Now, rarely in my experience would I find one single photograph to copy to make a painting or a drawing. Rather, I'm using a multitude of reference images. So an example of some of that artistic license that I use in a lot of my work is that sea stack that you see. Now, this was, again, inspired by an area further down the coast, and I just decided to add it in. I feel it anchors the composition. Now, I'm really enjoying the composition of this scene. I think I will make it into a bigger painting at some stage. Now, once I'm happy with the placement of all of those marks, I can then begin to sharpen up the image. I'm going to erase around some of these shapes to take away some of that smudginess, and then once I have some pretty well-defined forms, I'll go back with a mechanical pencil and some of my graphite pencils and start to sharpen up some of those areas. I really do enjoy this hatching technique, especially for drawing something like rocks. It adds a lot of structure. I really concentrate on getting the most graphite I can condensed into the paper just at those points where the deepest cracks occur. Now, for a stack like this that is behind a breaking wave, I don't want it to come all the way forward, so I am holding back, knowing full well that I'm reserving my darkest tones for that foreground cliff that's on the right-hand side and the rock that's on the far left. So everything here in the mid-ground area, we're just going to make sure we hold back. So the furthest I'd go with my graphite here would be around a 2B to a 4B. I would not go to 7B, 6B, or 8B. Now, I love this mono zero eraser. Again, you would have seen me use this in past episodes of Sketch Endeavor. It just allows me to surgically lift out areas for highlights. I decided that this breaking wave needed to come up a little bit, and I just love the way it really removes quite a lot of that graphite that's down on the paper. A fine accumulation of lines in this really light hatching technique can provide a lot of softness, and I find that this is starting to become a lot more interesting than just smudging it with a stump or my finger, that I like reintroducing some of those lines there to give it a bit more structure. Now, just on another note, in relation to Sketch Endeavor as a whole, I've gotten a lot of emails and comments and messages through social media or through my website from people wondering, what happened to Sketch Endeavor? Did I just quit? There have been so many things that have been happening in my life off camera and away from YouTube. But just to give you a little bit of an idea, I recently opened my own gallery, and I've had some commission projects that have taken a lot of time in the background. So as keen I was as to having Sketch Endeavor be a daily habit, some days it just wasn't possible. And I will admit, I felt really, really terrible about it. But now, starting to get fresh in 2020, I'm trying to reinstate this as a daily habit for myself. And again, the point of this whole exercise is to push ourselves as far as we can and really commit the time and dedicate to the practice of drawing, because I really believe this is going to pay dividends at the easel. We're going to show up with more confidence with wielding that brush as a result of having more command of what we can do in 2 dimensions. So if you're one of those people that was feeling bad about maybe skipping a day or two, and if that was me that was pressuring you, I really apologize. Don't worry, we all have off days. I had an off 3 months nearly, but hey, we're back at it again and nothing's stopping us now. Now you can see here the drawing is starting to shape up, but there's no real darks yet. So it's more or less the same tonally throughout. It's time to introduce a bit more black into some of these areas and start to bring them forward. It's much more difficult if I introduce too much tone in the initial stages. It's much more difficult to push that back down and try and remove that graphite than it is to increase the intensity. I liken this to almost turning up the volume. So I'm going to start very, very quiet, and then as the drawing progresses, we're just going to crank up that volume and add more and more and more to it, and it's going to get louder and louder and louder. There's a certain randomness to that triangular shape on the end of the paper stump that creates a lot of rock-like texture. So I'm using some of the marks that were laid down initially to inspire where these marks are going, the cracks that are coming between those forms. Now, of course, I am following along with my photographic reference, but it's not an exact copy or a duplicate of what I see in my photographs. I'm being guided here by the process. And there's a certain element of that I really enjoy. There's a kind of a randomness to the drawing process. Now, if you haven't already taken part and committed yourself to Sketch Endeavor or posted your work to Instagram using the hashtag Sketch Endeavor, then I really do encourage you to do so. There's a whole bunch of people already that have started posting their work to Instagram using that hashtag Sketch Endeavor. It's amazing to see how many people have taken part, with well over 5,000 people on that hashtag, and it started from nothing, so this is really super cool to see. Just want to give a quick shout out to Tony Predum, who I've been following for a really long time, even before Instagram. I've been following his work and I'm really inspired by his wildlife, but he's done some beautiful drawings, and here I just love this drawing that he's done of German Shepherds. This is absolutely exquisite. Amazing work, Tony. I'm a big fan, you know that. And Tony and I were actually exhibiting together a few years ago now for the Bird Art Award in Australia. I think it's called the Holmes Prize. And Tony took out the top prize with his painting Quill, which you'll see on his Instagram profile as well. So shout out to Tony, amazing work, mate, and a fantastic effort to everybody else using that hashtag SKETCHENDEAVOUR. Now I'm using three types of mechanical pencils mainly, a 0.35, a 0.5, and a 0.9. And I'm really enjoying the HB and 2B. I'm finding that the 2B mechanical pencil can go quite dark indeed. And so I can really build up that tone in this foreground area, but I can also do it with real precision with the mark making and tease out some of these rocky forms and really drive deep some of those grooves and those cracks between individual rocks. I can always go back and add darker tone over the top as well. I'm not completely embedding that paper with a load of graphite. There's still room to go. There's a certain carrying capacity to paper often where you'll be drawing on it and it just won't take any more darkness. But by using this technique and kind of hatching my way along and just building up slowly, I found that I've been able to push that darkness further and further and further. Now I've been preserving areas on the page for highlights to make way for these brightest brights that are going on, and I'm using white charcoal pencils, or chalk really. Some of my favorites are the General's charcoal pencil. Now this pencil doesn't seem to go down very well working directly over graphite. You have to preserve the area where you want those highlights to go. So there's a certain amount of planning in the drawing process, leaving plenty of room for these white highlights. And this is just going to go in the areas where that white water is catching direct sunlight. And just with a series of random marks laid down in a particular way, I'm starting to get that impression of white water. Now, if I really work that surface and really concentrate on a point of light, I can build up the whiteness of a highlight just as I can build up the darkness of a shadow with graphite. But again, there is a certain point where the paper won't accept any more chalk. So it's best to start off light and then gradually build up that highlight color as you're going. I mean, I know it's not a color, but yeah, you totally get what I mean. This is what I really love about working on gray paper as well. I haven't really done this in my career in the past. It had always been drawings on white paper where you would leave those lightest marks alone. That's how you had, the highlight areas, was because that white paper was showing through. But here, I just feel like there's more dimension and scope within our tonal variation in the drawing, and we're able to achieve a much more realistic effect by going for that mid-tone gray. So I'm really enjoying this Dreadnought gray card, which is made by Canford. Now, any of the materials that I'm talking about in this demo, I'm going to leave links in the description down below or state the name of whatever I'm using. Now here, that pencil that you just saw me use was a Staedtler Black. They have a certain amount of carbon mixed in with the graphite, and they are by far the darkest pencils I've ever used. And notice how the cracks in the rocks here are really starting to show up quite predominantly. And then when I add the crispy highlights with that white chalk pencil, it adds another little bit of dimension here to the right-hand side. Now, there were many thumbnail sketches that I put in the sketchbook before attempting this scene at this larger scale. And this is all gearing up to paint this as a studio painting at some stage. I might change the composition yet again, but I'm generally pretty happy with where this has gone. And I like doing this kind of groundwork before I do a larger painting. I think it's absolutely necessary so we don't get involved in abortive work in the studio. Planning is everything. Now, I'm sure you no doubt have heard of having 20/20 vision in hindsight. I try to do every painting I can with hindsight, having been there before, if at the very least with a detailed graphite drawing. Now notice how the cliff on the right-hand side is now coming so much further forward, away from those distant rock stacks. This is all down to the tone, and this is really one of the most exciting things about this kind of drawing. Again, I'm just using that mono zero to lift out some individual highlights. And once I do this, I can then go back in with that white charcoal pencil. Now, I've heard some people in the past talk about experiencing some trepidation when veering from their photographic reference, like they might somehow be found out. Here, I hope in this demonstration that you've been able to see that I've totally changed the seascape that I was presented with on the day when I was on the West Coast. This is an amalgamation of all of those inspiring things that I saw, the breaking waves, the assortment of rocks, but this is not an exact location that you can go to and see. All I want, though, is for it to hit the right notes so that somebody would recognize this as the West Coast of New Zealand. So as long as my geology is right, the quality of light, and the aspect from which we're viewing it, I think it would ring true to some people's experience with this landscape. So I'm never really overly concerned with getting everything exactly in the right place. Besides, all of those elements really do move as you, the viewer, moves. So if you're walking down the beach with your camera, it's always going to look different depending on your particular vantage point. So I never get too concerned with where rocks go exactly, or where, say, even a mountain goes, or whatever. I'm always free to change anything I want anytime. And I think you should feel that freedom too. So if you're looking for permission, you totally got it from me, if I may be so bold. So while I was fixing up my gallery and working on commissions, I'd steal away moments here and there to work on this drawing. I think all up, this drawing took me around 10 hours. But again, it was very bitsy, which was quite frustrating because it was on my drawing board the whole duration of the gallery setup time. And so I was just dying to get back to it to finish it off. But I'm very glad it's finished off now, and I'm really looking forward to more days committed to Sketch Endeavor this year and trying to get back to that daily habit. So again, if it hasn't quite worked out to be a daily habit for you, no worries, but just get back onto it as soon as you can and really push yourself. But that being said, if it doesn't work out to be a daily habit, don't beat yourself up. Whatever time you can commit will have a positive impact on your painting. Now, having completed this drawing, I'm really looking forward to painting it. I think this has all of the elements that I was looking for in a West Coast seascape. I'm still not too sure about how big I'm going to paint the scene, but I think it's going to have all of the elements that you see here. This was a super fun drawing to work on. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Sketch Endeavor as much as I've enjoyed sharing it with you. Now, again, if you would like to share your work and your progress with Sketch Endeavor, make sure you post to Instagram and use that hashtag Sketch Endeavor. I'm so overwhelmed and amazed with how many people are taking part in the Sketch Endeavor Challenge. It is awesome to see this outpouring of creativity from around the world. Now, if you liked this video, then please click that like button for me and leave me a comment down below. If you want to come back for more and see more episodes of Sketch Endeavor, some of my painting tutorials, the Creative Endeavor podcast, or any other videos that I post, then make sure you're subscribed. Click that notification bell so you're notified when I upload another video. As always, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, but most important, make sure you subscribe through my website at andrewtischler.com. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you again soon.